started, and this time people who've actually tried any of these open cloud type things talk about their experiences. If you haven't tried it, just pass. And then in the second round, we can have general comments about this sort of infrastructure. So, Jenna?
I'm sorry, Art's not here. He's done a lot more of this. I'm back to Shelley, which I consider to be, it's not an open claw, but I'm going to lump them all as claws. And Venkat, I saw you said, me too. I've never worked in virtual environments very much, but I'm pretty impressed with what I was able to spin up just even this morning from bed with my phone. We live in the dream. Sorry. Let's see, Spacebot is the other one I've got running inside a virtual machine on exe.dev. I haven't used anything intermediary for any real projects, though. I have a couple of real things that I've done before this morning's play, and so far I keep feeling like I don't want to get sucked into customizing my dev environment over and over again. We've all been there. So I've gone back to vanilla Claude code for my big stuff, but in a terminal, which makes me feel cool. And now I'm using vanilla Shelley for this, working on this production stuff, book production stuff today. Let's see if there's any other highlights. I could show some screenshots or something of how it looks if people are curious just to see. I have everything open at the moment. But let's make this the lightning round just to hear what people are up to. So I figured if you said go up and down, if it's Nathan next, here you go.
Yeah, I probably should pass because I haven't used any of the clause. But since you mentioned Claude Code itself, I'll say that I'm just getting my fingers into Claude Code. I've been really wrestling with how to really properly sandbox things, and I think it's only been within maybe the last few days that I've kind of started to zoom in on something with that, and so I expect to start using it a little bit more. One thing that keeps me from using services like I keep wanting to say exec.dev, is that at least for me, most of my personal use cases deal with like a lot of data I have locally or very bespoke tools that I have nice setup scripts for, but I'm just kind of reluctant to put those into the space constraints of exec.dev, but maybe I'll feel differently in a short time. I don't know. So not a lot of experience there. Also trying to keep things very vanilla in terms of Claude Code. I have my experiences are basically aligned with some of the stuff I've read, which is if you can write very good specs, you get very good results. But again, I've only tried sort of more small projects. So passing down to Venkat.
Yeah, I'll pass since I haven't used open cloud type stuff, only cloud itself. So I think up around to Ben.
Yeah, I'd be passing as well. I've used Claude Code and Codex a good amount. It's sort of become integrated pretty well into my workflows, and I'm kind of highly opinionated on how you should be using it. And although I find stuff like I remember Gastown, which I think has became OpenClaw, so I read about that, but I've never used it, so I'll skip.
Oh, sorry. After that, pass to Anant and then Anuraj. I misread the list.
Yeah, I haven't used OpenClaw or any of the other variants beyond Claude Code, so I'll pass it down to Anuraj.
Yeah, I haven't been using it either, but I've been itching to use. There are like these two versions that run on microcontrollers. One is under 900 kilobytes, and the other is like 20-30 kilobytes, and it runs on an ESP32 with Wi-Fi. That is what I want to try. Yeah, passing back to Jenna.
Yep. So second round prompt is just general reactions to this whole space of technology and thoughts about it. So Jenna, back to you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not giving it access to my email. I'm not doing any of this give it your life stuff at all. The places where I've had huge successes, as a non-coder, but someone who kind of basically understands how software works, has been what I called in the Chad Greenfield projects. So I have a big ass thing that scrapes, uses the sam.gov API, and then something like 20 different maritime ports in the US looking for bids for a naval architect client. And it really, it really does go grab the data in a way that's legitimate. It works. There's a dashboard for the team to use. Claude Code helped me put behind a Microsoft auth, which, everyone hates working with Microsoft front end stuff. But it was pretty easy, step by step, just follow the stupid instructions. So I think that the greenfield projects are where it might shine. The other way I think about this, and I didn't make this up, I read it from someone, but you have to imagine you're in a rowboat. And the thing about being in a rowboat is you can only look backwards. So everything that coders have figured out how to do, that's all kind of just normal stuff now, all this stuff is just really good at it. And anything where something creative and new has to happen, yeah, good luck. That's back to you again. So the rowboat thing has been working for me. The main thing about the clause is when can you get an agent to kind of be like an employee, working for you 24/7? And my original experiment with OpenClaw was instructive because part of why it works is its heartbeat or what they, polling. So I shut it down, but I missed one part of how to shut it down when I did it. This is 3 or 4 weeks ago now. And so it kept polling for a couple of days before I figured it out. And that alone, this is like a $70 stupidity thing. So I feel like I got off lightly compared to what some people are spending. The thing I don't understand yet about Shelley is, they're doing 20 instances that includes Shelley, and Shelley has access to all the big guys. So you can choose, Opus 4.6. And I do keep getting context limited on like today, it has started borking on some of the big stuff. But then, you just say, go start over in another session or whatever. So I think we're going to get there. Is there anything else top of mind? No, those are my current thoughts. I know. The basic thing is I do keep wondering about Sherlocking. So everything that these agents figure out will Anthropic and OpenAI just roll it in, Gemini 2 with the Google monster. So we'll see what the role for these third-party things are. I'll mention SpaceBot again because I think Art's been having good luck with that, and I was initially impressed as well. So passing back to you now, Nathan, again.
Yeah, so like I mean, as I said, I've only been kind of dipping my toes in. I had a big like porting over personal data project that it basically I wrote a spec and I basically got it to one shot the thing, which was fairly impressive to me at least because there was some tricky stuff in there about determining time zones and weather from location data that was not particularly specified, and it really aced it. I had one problem in it with the output it put out, but it was actually the problem existed behind the keyboard because I looked back and I had actually written the spec wrong about the particular thing, and it followed it, and it just did the wrong thing because I told it to do the wrong thing. Obviously, this is maybe a smaller project, so I don't know. In terms of like the clause, I kind of keep looking at it. I haven't quite figured out what I would use it for, and I'm a little worried about like cost. But maybe I'll spin something up on exec.dev at some point. That seems like the obvious place to host a claw instance that you want to control there. I've personally found myself pretty hampered with a lot of experimentation. Like I'm I'm sort of like oddly digital Amish in my personal life. Not like I like push off technology, but I just like I really only adopt it when I have clear use cases. So I just don't have a lot of technology that like most of my friends have and whatnot. And probably if you like looked at my apartment, you would think I was like anti-tech or something, but I'm not. I'm not at all. But that has kind of kept me from doing a lot of these things in my personal life because I just haven't had a clear use case. In my work life, I have a lot more cases, but I think I run into something that a lot of people, well, a lot of people who have maybe larger companies or deal with more sensitive data run into, which is what I am allowed to use is very restricted. It's kind of like these, well, I could run it self-hosted, but you know, I have an M1 with 32 gigs of RAM, which sounded great when I got it, and I thought was more machine than I could ever possibly use. And boy, did I make the wrong call with that. I can't get anything working on it that's any good. Um, not and have anything else running at the same time. And then what's offered through the corporate mothership are older models. They're sort of less capable. We're not allowed to have an API access because they're worried about spend. So it's all through a chat interface. So it's really much less useful for me. And I think a lot of people run into this, but I mean, maybe this is good. Like we were just seeing stories of people not really thinking things through and getting, you know, their corporate emails deleted or, parts of services taken down. But I feel like, and I mentioned this in the chat, and I apologize for maybe going on and on, but I'm developing strong opinions here that part of the problem is that we kind of keep thinking of these things when we're plugging them into our infrastructure as like deterministic tooling a little bit more, or even just like computers in general. Like maybe it's not perfectly deterministic, but this is like just a service with an API, and like we do the thing. And I think that's the wrong thing. And I know there's this big philosophical thing about should you treat these as people and AI psychosis and yada yada yada, but I actually feel like, sort of from a security perspective and an integration perspective, I'm increasingly coming to the opinion that the right way to think of agents is as people. Maybe people with scarce quotes, but people in sort of the corporate sense. And maybe we can think of it as like we are all agents. When we're working for the man, we're corporate agents. And this is just another kind of corporate agent. And that they should be slotted in. They should have a role with permissions, and it should obey the principle of least privilege, and there should be reviews on things they do. Just like if I was going to do something that would hit production, it would get reviewed. And like a lot of the stories, like the recent one that went the rounds about AWS, like you dig into it a little bit, and it was a failure of their review process. Like they pushed something to prod that didn't go through a review, and like that's not really the agent. That's the failure of process. Um, and I do kind of wonder if what's going to happen where a lot of the gains from this like AI is going to come through is not necessarily from these critters themselves, but from the fact that we're going to have to regularize a lot of our documentation and a lot of our process that before was just sort of like it was kind of enforced, but we didn't really have good ways of enforcing it or thinking about it, or like the documentation was wrong or out of date. Like we're going to have to start like putting that all now, making that much better, and that's going to help humans too. Like I have met multiple people now who have told me that when they get on board onto a new project, they don't even bother with the documentation that was written for people because it's never up to date and it's never accurate. They go read agents.md. And that seems very significant to me, that we are building a set of things that is useful for agents, but it's also really useful for people there. And I wonder if that's going to unlock a lot of the productivity gains are actually going to come from that, but that's going to take a while. And there's going to be a lot of people getting burned through bad or incomplete process in the meantime, and then probably a lot of these tools taking the blame for what are really process failures. So those are all my thoughts. I have talked a lot, but I will now pass down to Venkat.
Yeah, I think at this point I have way more questions than answers, and trying to think through like how important this really is going to be once some of the early hiccups get worked out. So I think OpenClaw should be thought of as the fast colonizer species after forest fires. You've got this biological phenomenon where if land is cleared, there's like fast growing weeds come and colonize first, but then the second wave happens and like more long-term stable plant life takes root. So I think we're seeing the transition right now. That's my current mental model. So I think the second wave is what we should form mental models around. I'm trying to think through what exactly is it. So when you run something like Claude Code on your own computer without a virtual machine or anything, what you're doing is relying on inbuilt protocols where it asks for permission anytime it tries to write to a new folder. That seems to be the only basic guardrail. Um, Writing to a new folder or I guess invoking certain new tools, lots of like command line tools it seems to just use without asking, but I haven't yet quite figured out when it asks me for permission, right? Like sometimes it seems to, like pip seems to trigger permissions and stuff. So it's kind of like illegible permissions boundary and illegible file system data writing boundary, or legible data boundary, but illegible permissions boundary for invoking other services. Now, so this is, I think, the same whether you're running it on a laptop or on some other machine you control completely with super user stuff. So OpenClaw seems to be a combination of several more architectural openness stuff, like moves. The first move, I guess, is giving Claude root control over an entire machine, right? So I don't know how it's actually done in practice. Like, do you just give it the super user password and then it can like do sudo or like just switch into SU mode whenever it wants, or what you do? But okay, full control of a machine. The second step, I'm trying to think of this as a series of loosenings of like the boundary of possibility. So it's now gone from like working on a regular account to working on super user account through the whole machine. Then you put the machine out on a cloud or something where it's kind of like physically not in your control. So the kinds of examples that post about like the agent that ran rogue and started deleting the inbox, if I recall correctly, that story ended with her running to the physical server and logging in and like killing the process or something, right? So there's actually a meaningful distancing that happens if you let that computer not be in physical reach, right? You can't pull the power card, you can't, I don't know, somehow go and like kill the process in another way, something like that. Okay, now it's online somewhere. Now you start giving it, I guess, tokens for other services you use, like Tailscale tokens, passwords for Google, stuff like that. And now you're doing more than giving it proactive permissions to go beyond like what it can discover and ask you about. You're telling it explicitly, it's not just this computer and file system and like things already installed on this computer. It's anything you can like make an API call to. And here's actually a set of things I'm giving you positive access to. And at this point, I think you run into other people's permissions boundaries. So on Reddit, I'm reading right now that if you try to give OpenClaw permission to use Google's anti-gravity OAuth service, it apparently gets you instantly and irrevocably banned with like, one strike you're out approach. So at this point, it's no longer just your own security and permissions policy. It's yours interacting with other people's policies. So yeah, at this stage, if you're playing fast and loose with your OpenClaw, doesn't mean other people will, and they will kind of like stop you at their doors. So something interesting is starting to happen now where your OpenClaw is, I think in Nathan's terms, uh, it's people in a second sense. It's not just that you are treating it as people, it's kind of like getting treated as people or not people by multiple other actors who have some control over the shape and porosity of its permissions boundary. So I think a good visual to keep in mind is an agent in sort of this full out on the web sense is basically two boundaries. One boundary is the data boundary. What actual data can it read, write, and irrevocably delete? And the other is kind of like a skills boundary, like what actions can it take and where do those skill memories reside? Does it live locally with default permissions? Does it live locally with some extra permissions loop? Does it live elsewhere on somebody else's server? Um, and so forth. So there's like, so this, if you think of this agent as an entity, it's basically two boundaries, data boundary and program boundary. And maybe they aren't two, maybe they should be considered one. After all, programs are just another kind of data, but for the moment, I'm finding it useful to keep the two distinct in my head. And now the fifth level, I don't know how many levels, I'm losing count, is the agents are going to run into each other's permission boundaries, right? And if I look through the R OpenClaw or Reddit, I suspect I will already find examples of this, where some person, like Alice is running her OpenClaw to do something, and Bob is running his OpenClaw to do something else, and at some point, Alice's OpenClaw is going to try to do something that's within Bob's OpenClaw permission boundary. So what happens in that Venn diagram intersection? Can we get into both like well documented situations like race conditions or something, and can we also get into very human dumb agent dynamics, like the Three Stooges things of like them hammering each other or something? I don't know what weirdness can happen at this interface. So yeah, I think we are starting to walk down or slide down a slippery slope or walk down a staircase, depending on how controlled you think this is going to be, uh, um, a trajectory into basically a permission soup of illegible Venn diagram boundaries. And then you ask the question, why would you want to do that? What is worth doing that requires you to go down the slope and cannot be completely controlled? Um, and I think here the reason I'm both reluctant to adopt and kind of loss of how to adopt is I'm myself not that way. So I think there's something going on here where yes, it's kind of like a person, and yes, you kind of have to not just treat it as a person, but also kind of teach it how to be a person. And really, the only reference you have is yourself. You cannot set up an agent like this to be a kind of person you yourself are not. Now, I'm not the kind of person who uses like a million services cobbled together in weird ways where I have to keep track of lots of documentation of how different APIs work and how it's work together. And even though I don't use VPN private service VMs for this yet, I think all my experience and mentality is basically a sandbox mentality. Like, as I've said often on these calls, the only language I have significant experience in is MATLAB, and MATLAB is um, basically a complete sandbox. It gives you a fairly complete set of tools to do things within a certain context, and going outside that context is both hard for people with that mindset, and also MATLAB makes it hard. It doesn't talk well with the outside world. Whereas I think Anuraj is a good example of a person who is constantly maintaining situation awareness of the million tools that are constantly being created and retired, and is able to pull together 50 different tools in an orchestrated network and do things across 10 different tech paradigms, right? So the kind of agent that I'm capable of creating sort of in my own image, there's this whole God idea of you create things in your own image. So I think we all are going to do that, and you'll only be able to create agent personalities that are relatively close to yours. So I'm actually now starting to wonder if a lot of these capabilities will be off limits to lots of people simply because they're not that kind of person. They don't know how to project that kind of behavioral profile onto the capabilities. And maybe we all have more than one. Maybe we all have 3 or 4 ways of doing things that can be projected, and some of them will fit very locally. Some will require this full messy out there. Like, one I think I could do is I am a little bit of like a information holder. Like one of the early projects I'm having it do is go into my library folder where there are like several thousand PDFs of papers I've collected over the years, and I've asked it to start organizing. And this is a behavior that I do practice on a larger scale, right? Like I download papers from archive and other paper sources. So I do have like some roving scavenging behavior across multiple sites. So I can imagine setting up an agent that's more than just my local folder and tell it, all right, you are now my official roving librarian information agent. So go live on this open cloud. And you are now, uh, your job is to go around trawling and fishing for interesting papers based on what we decide are my interests and like maintaining a constant library. And I think this is going to be useful because there's a mad scramble for data, and I think we're all going to start becoming data hoarders. But this is again like a projection of a very particular personality of mine, which is probably amongst like 3 or 4 personalities I have. So I'm starting to think like there's going to be a mirroring principle here. The demographic variety or psychographic variety of agents out there is going to start looking like the variety of humans on the human side. So yeah, those are my initial speculative thoughts. But yeah, I will get into this at some point. It's just a pain since it's kind of like left-handed behavior for me. Like using Claude Code was very right-handed behavior. I am right-handed. It's an extension of like things I do myself. But using OpenClaw seems to like require a lot of left-handed behaviors, things I don't naturally do. So it'll take me some time to get over like a procrastination and reluctance and actually do this stuff. Anyway, passing around to Anant.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. When, as I said, I haven't used any of these new agent orchestration frameworks, so to speak. I did read the x.dev blog, the show don't tell post, and I mean, reading that, I was wondering, like, who's going to use this, and like, what's the use case for this in some sense, like, the one-off application, the sort of the easy to build and also equivalently easy to throw away type use cases seems like the primary target for what they're trying to do. But the actual infrastructure that they've built for this that looks impressive. I mean, obviously they come from a very strong technical background, but I just realized while reading that and hearing other people talk, I realized that turns out I'm actually quite conservative in how I adopt new stuff. Like one, I don't quite know what I'll use it for. I'm still trying to understand that. And two, I'm very reluctant to give access, like the sort of unbridled access to stuff. It reminded me that the first app that I gave access to my computer was Granola. Like when I downloaded Granola, and Granola chose to integrate with system audio as opposed to like any specific service, isolated service-based transcription. So which I thought was very interesting, and how it oriented itself to a system audio, and that had worked very well. And similar thing with Cloud Code, it oriented around the file systems and what I can do there. But I haven't felt comfortable yet to experiment with other stuff. I'm not sure when I will, but uh, and it also makes me think that the sort of not the information overload, but the sort of the Cambrian explosion of experiments and all the things that people are doing. I wonder if there were other previous paradigms that was similarly like this, and I was trying to see ChatGPT to see if the previous paradigms, if there's anything to learn from the previous paradigms in some sense. But anyway, that's all I had. I'll pass it down to Anuraj.
Um so I think like I'm quite different from a lot of the people here. So I try to adopt new tech as soon as possible. So the only thing, the reason I'm not run this is primarily time, because like I already bought a SIM card for it, and I have like an extra phone for it. So all the things I've like needed to set it up, I already have it, and but like it's mostly the time. So I've been building MCP servers for a lot of my robots. So I know exactly the use case I wanted to use for, And then yesterday on the weekend, I also made like a gave it some speaking ability via some I don't know if you have heard about 11 Labs. So it's like a DTS service, and then downloaded some custom voice stuff for the clause. So basically, like I have a lot of the stuff ready. So the only and the other thing is basically like how to sandbox it. So that is like keep thinking about. So I've been thinking about how to like maybe I should give it a separate email and keep my all my stuff separate from what. So if there is something going wrong, like at least my stuff is safe. So that is like one of the things I think about. And like I've been also thinking about like how this is changing the actual markets too, right? Because like this is increasing the demand for inference quite significantly, and then like people at least like I don't have the budget to keep it running 24/7, but like for some use cases I think I could use it. So but this is definitely like changing the markets, and I think like this will also affect how like local inference is done, and I think it will increase the demand for local inference. And what else was there? Yeah, so basically like I've been like meaning to try the ones which are like really simple to do. I think nanobot one is the one that is not as bloated as OpenClaw, and then the ones on the ones that which run on the microcontrollers. That's so yeah, that is what I have been like wanting to try it out. um yeah, those were my thoughts. Passing back to or passing into Ben.
Yeah, I've so I haven't actually looked too much closely into OpenClaw, and I don't know. I'm not attracted to like the fundamental idea. Um, but I did really like the line of viewing agents as people in the corporate sense, which I think captures both the fact that I don't think there's actually that much underneath them. Like they're not like actual entities or beings, but they are very much people. Just from the way I think Van had that post with I thought text is all you need. So I do think like people in the corporate sense is a very interesting way to put that. But yeah, I'm not sure I have too much to add here. But I do think it's interesting. I do think permissions wise, something like a VM is probably the right choice. So yeah. Anyway, I think don't know if I'm going to be passing to anyone else. So I think it's just if anyone wants to speak.
Yep, floor's open for anybody else to have who has any more thoughts.
I think the main thing I'd like to emphasize is where people are having fun and really easy successes is quick personal projects. So for everybody who hasn't done something yet, finding just any place to go play for some dumb little app that you had an idea for. And so I'm lucky that, I've been in the middle. I have had several real projects come along where trying to spin something up made perfect sense. So it's pretty interesting that of our group, you guys who are all much more knowledgeable from me than I am, have, except for Anuraj, of course, have done much less tire kicking. This is just it's like this is the time we're in, so it's just an interesting observation. Passing back.
I wonder if um, the need to give these things their own infrastructure is going to kind of open up the space for plan like email plans that are sort of multiple email accounts, like family plan sort of things. And I know there's a few providers that offer that sort of thing right now. Um, but like if you want to go with Google, you wind up creating like a Google Workspace um, account to manage emails, and that's actually kind of maybe a little bit overpowered for a lot of people. And it's also because Google so strongly isolates their corporate stuff from their personal stuff, it also tends to really lag in features. Like you still can't, if you're on a corporate account, like share Notebook LM notebooks externally. So there's sort of a lot of things like that. But I do wonder if we're going to see a lot more things like multiple emails, because I suspect that providers are not going to be like really like we often use personal, like free personal accounts for like El Cheapo, um like small organizations, but I that's always been kind of a little bit of a gray area and abuse, and I think that might, is that becomes a more common case. Though I'm seeing Jenna is bringing up that there is an agent mail thing, that might be better for that. But anyway, I wonder if this is going to drive some diversification in the consumer space, actually, that we haven't seen in terms of plan flexibility, not just for email but for other services.
About the consumer products itself, I think OpenAI is planning some device based on OpenClaw. At least that is what the first rumor seems to be. So even the consumer market might change because of these.
One thing I'm curious about is I think this is going to be the forcing function that really upgrades um, authentication protocols, right? Like already we are seeing that extremely slow and messy transition from username password to a magic link sent to your email to, like, one-time passwords. And now I think several services are like, I don't know, very subtly tricking me into setting up pass keys. I haven't systematically done that. So the uh, landscape of like types of authentication protocol out there entirely on the consumer side, I'm talking about, not infrastructure people. It's shifting very slowly, and I think this might force it all to kind of jump paradigms very quickly. Um, and I'm actually, we should maybe do a session on this about like just the variety that's out there. I'm not entirely sure how many of them work. Um, like yes, there's key pairs, and that's how I use, I guess, GitHub and logging into my WP Engine account. There seem to be many of these token schemes. I don't know exactly what they are. And then there's like standard password schemes, and then like, uh, two-factor type things. So in the couple of minutes left, maybe Nathan has a take on what's happening in this landscape.
Sure. I'll be thrown under the bus like that. I don't think there's actually been a lot of work. There's like everybody sort of acknowledges that the space is bad, but it's actually really hard to find a good set of trade-offs there. I think passkeys are kind of interesting because they are in many ways a much a better solution for people, and they are a stronger solution. I think there's this weird thing happening where there's become this really reaction in the security space. Like everybody was really into passkeys, because there was this vision that people were going to carry around YubiKeys. Everybody was going to have a YubiKey, and everybody was going to authenticate with a hardware token. And it turns out that actually people don't want to have another key on their keychain, and that people would rather just have a central account of all of these things. And then all the security people are like, no, 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 central point of failure, eh, which I mean is true, but I also think it's a little bit of an overreaction, because it is still, it's like one of those things where it's like there's a big thing about like, oh, SMS is trash for 2FA, and it is trash for 2FA, but 2FA over SMS is way better than no 2FA at all. And the alternative is not like, oh, if you don't have SMS code, you're going to use a YubiKey. The alternative is, for most people, that if you don't have a SMS code, you're just not going to do it. And I think part of there's this weird thing happening in the security space right now, where there's a real like significantly, the perfect being the enemy of the significantly better, and it always has been kind of thus. That's on the human front. Passkeys don't really help with agents. Um, and I think one of the things that is worth saying is that agents speak text, and they speak um, and they often speak APIs because APIs are text. Um, Humans speak images online. We don't think we tend not to think about that because we're like, oh, I'm reading a lot of text. Well, no, what you're doing is you're seeing an image and you're processing that image, and that image happens to contain bits that you process as communication. And that is actually very different. It's like, to a certain extent, humans are not textual animals. We've always been visual animals, and the text is a graphed on thing, whereas agents are the reverse. They are textual animals to it. I'm not sure I should say animals, textual critters that are where vision is sort of the second thing. And so I think that the authentication for agents is going to wind up being different. A lot of what I've seen is um, with around the agent discussion is using maybe more key pairs for agents. I think what has not really caught on in the space is maybe the idea that key pairs need to be a lot more ephemeral. Everybody sort of thinks as key pairs as the thing that you keep around forever. I've got the SSH key and that's my SSH key for everything, sort of thing. And I remember reading many years ago, actually before the Act Collective was even a glint in Venkat's eyes, that a perspective that said, no, tie the key to the device. Just have a million SSH keys. It's easy to add them to your whatever that file is. I'm now forgetting that lives in your .ssh directory. And I started doing that. And it actually is a big load off because now SSH keys are disposable for me. And I think that that might be the way that like key pairs go. And so I can see a situation where everything is actually kind of a key pair, but humans interact with key pairs through this interface of path keys because it's really a key pair in the background. There is what's happening. And agents interact with them sort of directly. I also think there's been some work with agents, and I think this might actually be the right way to go for some of this security, is that rather than giving them access to API keys or key pairs directly, what you do is you have an MCP server that is the API, and then that MCP server injects authentication. So if something does go wrong, like it starts deleting your emails, you don't have to be like, oh, I have to revoke this key or something. Is you just have this MCP server, this sort of central authentication choke point. So I wonder if you're going to start seeing more of that, and if that's actually sort of the ultimate use case of MCP servers, is as a way to sort of isolate the authentication from the agent. And in that sense, you could imagine MCP servers being a little bit like passkeys for humans. They're now passkeys for agents. So those are my thoughts. But yeah, the space is bad. The space is fractured. It's really dependent on OAuth, and I don't actually think OAuth is really the future. It's probably better ways of managing key pairs and things that look like passkeys or passkey analogs is probably where it's going to
All right. I definitely think this is worth a full session. So maybe the next session, a couple of weeks from now, we will talk authentication protocols. And in the meantime, if anybody has good reading suggestions, we can read about this stuff because it feels like this is actually the friction and bottleneck point. All right. So that's it for this week. See you next week for the Ethereum session.
Thank you.